next door. Part of the building that many of you don't go or afraid to go. Just to give you upfront advertisement, next Wednesday, Monday evening lecture, but next Wednesday is Iñaki Avalos, architect from Madrid. That will be Wednesday, March 2nd. And I also want to take the opportunity to remind you to attend the lectures by our candidates for the faculty search. The first one will also be next Wednesday, March 2nd at noon, and that will be Kelly Baer from Los Angeles. Marcia received her BFA in graphic design. It's 15-minute late crowd. Marcia received her BFA in graphic design from Indiana University and her MFA in graphic design from Yale. In 1995, Marcia began teaching at UIC. She also, the same year, founded the firm Studio Lab, which focuses on design of identity, information, and environments. Marcia's been director of the School of Art Design since 2004, and was really one of the key figures in forming the multidisciplinary UIC Innovation Center in 2006, a collaboration among 3 colleges, engineering, business, and our own College of Architecture and the Arts. Soon after the disastrous results of the 2000 election, remember Florida, remember hanging chads, remember Gebbia. Marcia was a founding member of Design for Democracy, which evolved into a collaborative effort with the AIGA, students and faculty at UIC, as well as design professionals and election officials from across the country, to redesign, in a sense, how democracy gets done. You could say nothing less than that. From ballots and polling place signage to voter education literature and even training. The results of this work have been published in Marcia's book, released in 2007, also titled Design for Democracy, Ballot and Election Design. In addition to her work for Design for Democracy, Studio Lab's client list includes the AIA, you know them, Steelcase, Whirlpool, University of Washington, Motorola, Mattel, Morningstar, Target, the City of Chicago, and the Spertus Institute. And if you go, you can see some of Marcia's more recent award-winning environmental graphics packages in the Cricket Sexton project. The work of Studio Lab has won numerous national and international design awards, and their work has been collected in many museums, including collected in the Art Institute of Chicago's permanent collection. My sense from Marcia, given her recent invitations over the last decade to talk about Design for Democracy, is that she wanted to do something different, and so we're happy to provide that occasion. I suppose the lesson to be drawn in some sense from this is that if you're interested in opening your work to new audiences, to become political or engaged in some way, as Marcia's work has brilliantly and spectacularly done, you can only do it through a relentless attention and commitment to your own craft and discipline. And Marcia's background and rigor in that domain is unmatched and is an exemplary example of that discipline. As we start to think about making connections across the college, Marcia and I and others are hoping for much greater connection between architecture and design. In many ways, the overlaps are obvious. We both conceive of our fields as first being about the organization of information and believe that our forms of education train people, in particular, our kind of education, to be team leaders and general strategic thinkers. And certainly simply being able to watch Marcia as a fellow director has been an incredible learning experience in all of her endeavors as an educator, a designer, and an administrator. She cuts to the chase while always remaining open to new information and seemingly effortlessly is able to reconfigure any situation, even the most dire, which we are constantly every day reminded of, into profitable and productive ways. She's our no-nonsense visionary, and we're extremely lucky to have her as a member of our community. So welcome, Marcia.
I'm not moving as far as from Design for Democracy as one might hope, given all the clever budget cutting we're having to do lately. But I last talked to architects in Washington, D.C. in November at the ACSA Administrators Conference. they asked for a title for my lecture long before I was ready to give one, and knew that they were asking me to speak on design for democracy, as many people do. So I came up with this clever title, Democratic Design and Design for Democracy, having no idea what I was going to do with that. I do know the part that is design for democracy, which Bob mentioned, and we'll come back to that later. But what did I mean by democratic design is the big question. And maybe it's still a little bit interesting to me, but I'm not even sure it's the right one to frame the work I want to show you. So bear with me as I think through how to organize the work that I do with many other people, actually. So by democratic design, do I mean design by the people, for the people? Probably not, because designers are experts in design, and people generally are not. So we need people in our process as we design for people. But what do I mean by this idea of including people? So one of the things that is definitely permeating the fields of industrial design and now graphic design are anthropology-based research techniques. I think you all are aware that we now have a PhD anthropologist on our faculty, Bruce is here, and the field of industrial design has been using these techniques for some time. But the idea is that if you watch people and how they behave, you gain insights on the things they need, rather than asking them what they want and need from a commercial design standpoint. Also, we're able to reach audiences that we might not be able to reach through these techniques. We are designers coming from certain backgrounds with certain knowledge, and we need the knowledge and to understand the backgrounds of others to create products and communications for them. There's also this growing area called participatory design, and this is the one where I question it sometimes in the way it's applied, because sometimes it is people designing design instead of designers designing design. But I'm very interested in the concept of including people in design process and in transparency of design process. And these are things that are driving some of the work we're doing at Studio Lab. So as an example of this, we were invited by the provost of the University of Washington to help the University of Washington to imagine a new college of the environment. This would need to combine experts from different colleges, experts in science, in architecture, in urban planning, in public policy, and be a new kind of college that was going to reach out into the world in a way that academic institutions don't generally do. So we developed exercises to try to gain information, to try to engage the experts with each other, workshops that ask questions of speculation, what could happen, and ask people to pose statements of obligation, what must be done, and so on. In a setting with a lot of people around the themes of the environment, key themes of the environment. This was a way of teaching us what we needed to know to help them to visualize this new college, and for the participants to engage with each other in ways they had not engaged before. As academics, which Studio Lab has a number of, we uniquely understand the driving force behind academic achievement. So things like reward systems for faculty would need to change in a college like this. So these kinds of questions could be engaged and answered and brought to the surface. So here we are bringing people together, participating in design process to create a new college, a thing that isn't even a design. We don't need a college, we need a building. We don't need a place, we just need an idea. And then ultimately, we are looking to diagram this new college that in a way that helps people look at something. This is not the final one, kind of the cooler looking one. This is one of the diagrams we came up with to try to help explain how these different components needed to come together and reach out into the community. And a lot of this work that we're doing in design strategy is about this. It's about bringing people of different constituents together to bring their expertise to bear, to create new ideas and for organizations. Also, I think this idea of democratic design can be applied to the more traditional areas of graphic design practice. Identity is an area where what we create is serving to represent an organization. To perform often as a voice of leadership, we're creating websites, publications. We're often to help author them, that get the ideas and policies of organizations out into the world. We're very much about clarifying information, as Design for Democracy shows. This with the idea of building understanding and trust from an educational point of view. Also, we can help people find the way in buildings, so these really fall into categories that we are engaged with at Studio Lab. And Studio Lab is, we have offices in Chicago and in San Francisco. The people that are not here today, that I'm showing the work of many people that are not here today, some of them graduates of our program, specifically Tara Kennedy is a graduate of our graphic design program, Mia Milan as well. Technologists and writers. And we basically, when we're working on identity, we're dealing with a lot of times organizational change. So these same techniques of participatory design are behind the scenes of identity in terms of gathering information from a lot of people who have say in the outcome of a new mark, a new logo. This is a rebranding of Alzheimer's Association, completed in 2004. Nonprofit identity is very different than corporate identity. Nonprofit is all about consensus, and those of us in an educational institution know what that feels like. So a lot of opinions have to be heard. To actually make the change of this logo, they let all the chapters of Alzheimer's Association vote on it. The vote had to be 51%. I think the final vote was 52 in favor. And that was with about a year's worth of work behind the scenes, convincing people that the change was necessary. The change happened to address audiences. It was very care-based. The first identity was very care-based. And Alzheimer's Association funds is the largest funder of research outside the U.S. government, so we needed a more sophisticated appearance there. Also, our identity work is about dynamic identity and identity that's based in ideas. So this was the change from the Chicago Historical Society, from a rendering of the building, so from structure as visual symbol to the voices of history and the Chicago skyline. And the idea of this mark is that it's changeable and reflective of the city as well as its voices in history. The identity for WorkSpring, which is a new steelcase company, actually came about from the research. The visual identity actually came from this kind of participatory research. This is when we were trying to determine the potential audience for this place. It's a place where you rent rooms for collaborative sessions, essentially. And you could be alone to use the space. You could be with a group of up to 50 people. You could be doing social work or extreme work. We call it extreme work, just very focused work. And these were the names we gave to the different kinds of rooms that would be used at WorkSpring. And we ended up using this symbol as a way of depicting those audiences, which became the key component of the identity program. In this case, we were involved with the Steelcase group. It was only a handful of people from Steelcase from the very beginning, and were able to form the whole, be participants in the formation of the whole organization. It exists here in Chicago on Ohio Street, and it is the prototype for what hopefully becomes a network of these places internationally. In the area of publication design, we're often doing publications. Well, we do less and less publication design actually, because we're doing more and more strategy. But one of our last significant publications was the report on integrated practice from 2006 for the AIA, and I'm sure some of you have this and might have been irritated by the fact that it folded out into big posters. But the irritation was also provocation, and it was very much a part of the plan. We also worked with Daniel Friedman, who was in the College of Fellows at the time, the head of the group that repositioned the Latrobe Prize, which I know we have two UIC winners of this Latrobe Prize. But we were proud to be involved in this in terms of taking it from what was a sort of a dusty look to a modern, more provocative ideas around the Latrobe Prize. In information, we've done a lot of work in the product realm, icons for products that need to be produced by injection molding or on digital screens. These were from the Maytag brand of Whirlpool. There were like 150 of these, too many, but it was kind of fun to do that. And we do a great deal of information design, sometimes for the financial data modeling. I only understood this one for the period of time I was working on it. I couldn't explain it to you at the moment. But anyway, it's important information for financial investors and advisors. And this is an interactive piece that's still in the prototype phase, but hoping it becomes part of the philanthropic world. It's a mapping of all of the grant giving across foundations in different categories. So this was in the category of climate change, the sample you're seeing here, and what Rockefeller Foundation is investing in. The idea is to share data about grant giving so that different organizations can see where they're putting their money and find holes in the system or find points of collaboration. Okay, so back to my topic of architecture. So when I was asked to speak in Washington, this was the statement, the part of the program statement for the ACSA Administrators Conference. And as a graphic designer, I was thinking, well, what should I show? What would be of interest to this audience? And two things stood out from this: the idea of integrity of built environments and deepening the relationship between design and policy. The first one ties in with wayfinding in terms of our specific forms of practice, and the next with information. So these are two projects that I thought I would share with you today. One is the Spertus Institute. First I have to tell you, we have almost no experience in this, and this is what we told Crick and Sexton actually. There are reasons why. Because we are not so interested in applied science systems, and architects are terrible clients for graphic design firms. They know, it's like, I think it's the doctor-patient thing. Doctors make the worst patients, architects make three-dimensional designers make the worst two-dimensional design clients. So that's been my experience historically anyway, so hopefully that's changing. Also, wayfinding projects are really, really bad for business of design practice. The fees are set well in advance. They usually come from the architectural fees, so it's sort of like robbing the pockets of the firm you need to collaborate with to get any money for a project. And the projects also go on for years. We're used to projects that go on for months. So you have a low budget and you're going to work for years. It's really bad. I think we have to change, this is something we can do in our new schools, we have to change the whole practice of wayfinding, including the name of it. I really, really hate signs stuck on buildings, and I have a bad example to show you before I show you the good example. This building in Denver was being built, I think, about the same time, or it was being finished about the same time Spertus was starting, so it was referenced a lot. And I go to Denver quite often because my husband's from there, so I went to check out what was done with the signage in this building, full of angles everywhere. They were acrylic signs full of angles. And I just think this is the worst possible thing that could be done from a wayfinding point of view. And I think one of the things that happens is because it's not a good practice from a business standpoint, firms that specialize in this kind of work are really bad graphic design firms. And this has to change. I'm not insulting anyone in the room. Okay, so Crick and Sexton believed in us for some reason, based on the conversation. We wanted their building to show the way. I think they liked that idea. We didn't want to stick a bunch of signs on it. And so they were willing to take a risk on Studio Lab to do the wayfinding of Spertus Institute. One of the other cool things is that the building was not built, and so we didn't have to go in and apply things. We could think about what could have impact on the services. Also, the concept, the Spertus concept was very powerful and interesting. Let there be light is the mantra of Spertus Institute, and the architects interpreted that in their building concept. So this is where, when we started, this is where we were. There were renderings of the facade. There was an existing identity we were asked to not touch, and so we had an existing identity that needed to come to life in a building that was not yet built but had a great concept. So we were interested in this idea of candlelight, because the symbol is candlelight, and the idea of flickering light, and how could that be the graphic force behind the identity system for the inside of the building. First of all, we wanted to lighten it. We thought that heavy orange was not the right thing, so we played with outline. We cut letter forms out of acrylic and tried overlapping letter forms to create a flickering effect. And ultimately what worked was two typefaces, and one of them came from their existing identity standards, so there was a serif italic and a sans serif Roman. And the edges are not important. I just showed them to say that we needed to eliminate the edges. And so the idea ultimately was light passing through type, two different fonts. It was hard to get it to be legible, but made legible. And then conceptually, also formally, we liked how the Hebrew forms, letter forms, seem to have some of the same forms in the overlapping type. And then conceptually, it was really about light. So these were sort of the key components of this system. And they are applied on glass surfaces throughout the building. And then the main wayfinding is really just directors at the elevators. And again, on glass, etched type on glass. And are very architectural, so they were designed to be the wall between the two elevators. This just shows that the atrium space, you can see 3 of the directories at one time. The client's main concern was how do I get people to the 10th floor, or the 9th floor, the 9th floor of the museum. How do I get people to walk into this building, know they can go to the 9th floor, and I think they envisioned you walk in the door and you see a directory and a big arrow. And so we needed a way to achieve that same effect without interfering with the space. This is what we were expected to do for the exterior Spurs, to figure out how to put type on some kind of sign that would go across, but we ignored that with the encouragement of the architects and thought instead about the entry facade as what is the experience of walking by the building. You would not see. You have to be across the street to see this, and nobody walks on that side nobody who's pondering walking inside Spurs is walking on the opposite side of the street. They're walking on Michigan Avenue. So this is pretty ineffective. We wanted to think of what's that experience when you're walking down the sidewalk. So this is an early sketch by Jody Work, another one of our designers at Studio Lab, who had this, we wanted to show the emotional feeling of what it should feel like walking by Spurs. You're welcome to come in, there's something cool going on in there. It's interesting, you can see the brand, you can see what's inside. And we wanted to create that experience. We were inspired by and taught about the mezuzah, that is the text in the threshold of a Jewish household, and so that became the inspiration for etched graphics. We scrolled the Let There Be Light type and identity into a scroll and photographed it and created etched graphics for the full canvas of the entryway. So it's very subtle in certain light and very strong in others. Conditions. Donors do not like their names flickering in light. They like their names cast in stone, so we did that too. So this is the font. This is the italic, the version of the font, serif font, that's italic in the flickering typeface. Is here, all caps, Roman, cast in terrazzo. And the donor wall that also is static, but inspired by some of the other graphics. We do have applied signs in the ADA required signs in the hallways, but that was the only place we had to do that. And we were lucky to have one of our colleagues in San Francisco led a Design for Democracy-based project on emergency evacuation graphics, and we were able to apply some of the concepts she discovered to these signs, which are normally really horrible. I think they're usually just the architectural plans stuck on foam core. So, and I have to show off a little bit because we're not wayfinding experts. We got this big award in the same category as Renzo Piano and Herzog and Demeron. So, yay to the team that did all this great work. And this was just this is where I could take a drink. This is where some of the judges' comments. We were really surprised at how much people got this, because when you go there, it seems almost not there. But that the judges of the environmental graphics competition understood the value of that. And then I will also just do the brief version of Design for Democracy, because it is about deepening relationship between design and policy, and I think that this is something we share between our design disciplines. The more influence we have over policy, the more impact we can make. And this began on this very specific day, which was that Florida election, and this was the ballot that was so controversial in Palm Beach County, Florida. One of the first things that happened with response to what was wrong with this ballot, this was from a local paper in the South, and Paula Scheer, partner of Pentagram, created this op-art piece for the New York Times explaining why so many people might have voted for Pat Buchanan instead of Al Gore. I forget what the percentage was now, I used to know all the figures, but Pat Buchanan's percentage of votes in this county were through the roof compared to all other counties. And so we were, in AIGA, at the time of this, I was involved in the leadership of AIGA. We had been trying to get legislation into, language into legislation to improve design of not only ballots and election design, but all kinds of other things, and not getting very far. And what happened in Florida was really our opportunity to step forward and say that we could really make a difference in the field of communication design. I was very interested in working on this, and I was in Illinois, so we looked around locally for what might be done. And this was the ballot for judicial retention elections in Cook County in 2000. So over 8 pages like this, 133 candidates, and as you can see, what's wrong is the yes and no votes are actually weaving across the punch. This is what's called a butterfly ballot, the famous butterfly ballot, because you have to vote from both the left and the right to cast a vote. There's a question of retention, which has to be asked in English and Spanish, and there are candidates' names in all caps condensed, which is about the least legible type form you can find. And so, on behalf of AIGA, we redesigned this ballot without any change of technology, just a change of design to show that it could be made clearer, but it still had a lot of information on the page, but it could be made clearer. And then this was just demonstrated in the less dense areas of the ballot, the idea being that if you have to vote from the left and the right at some point, it should be happening throughout the ballot. Then we discovered that capital letters, lowercase letters are illegal in the state of Illinois. And so it took 2 years to be able to use lowercase letters in the names of the candidates on the ballot. Here we engaged, the experience modeling group of Sapient with their ethnographic research techniques were involved in this project. They gave us a pro bono research team to take a look at an election that was happening in March of 2001. Came back with different ways of defining voters, the experience in the polling place, clear stages of the voting process, and then we worked together on this idea of mapping the types of voters with the voting process and what we call an opportunities matrix, which helps identify things to improve from a design standpoint. There were lots of things to improve. This is the training manual that the poll workers were using at the time. Really confusing, hard to understand, and so much of the voting experience depends on interaction with the poll workers. So this was redesigned, working with David Orr in Cook County. Suburban Cook County, those of you voting tomorrow in Chicago might not see this, but in suburban Cook County, out in Evanston, we see these materials still, the redesign. Using diagrams instead of photographs so we can draw out the most important details. Most poll workers are not young, and so the type is very big and the instructions very clear. Samples of forms are provided, and so on. And so Stephen Malamed, who is also here, was my partner in crime on all of this, and we combined 2 classes, an industrial design class and a graphic design class at UIC, and brought this project into the classroom, which is where we were able to create lots of really powerful examples that helped us to take it to a national level. So our students combined, figured out what to work on, and they worked on all of these things. They were trained as election judges. They were briefed on the Sapient research. We conducted mock elections in the space you'll recognize if you do break the other side of the building. Some of the graphic designers worked on an identity for the voting process. They're on the right there, they're working out how to make it not read as hotel. The industrial designers spend a lot of time thinking about universal design. How can we design for people who are standing or seated and use the same equipment? And how can we provide tools for those who are disabled to have a better voting experience? There's a lot of nasty stuff behind the scenes of an election that can go wrong, and our students took on with the Cook County Clerk's Office a redesign of all the forms and envelopes that are used to process administratively the election. So what's cool about this is every little thing means something. If you look at the envelope system, the gray envelopes go one place at the end of the day, the white another place. The ones with the blue edges are used during the day, the ones with the red edges are used after the polls close. And they had never seen anything like this in this world, and they're still using it today in suburban Cook County. This is also all materials that are required to produce an election in the 2,500 polling places, actually it's 5,000, 2,500 in the city, 2,500 in the county, are contained in these blue boxes. They get delivered to like the church basement and the lobby of the business building the week before the election, and you pull the stuff out and produce an election. So the industrial designers analyzed this whole thing and came up with a much better system, modular loading system where things could be found. They also realized that furniture might not be available on site, and signboards are not available, so is it possible to use components of the voting supply carrier for design purposes. Also, they added, pretty quickly, you think it was something we've done a long time ago, but handles and wheels, so that one person could deliver these. Actually, there's interesting stories behind things like that. We learned efficiency isn't always the goal in producing elections, because it takes two people to deliver that. That's 2 employees, that's 2 voters, as opposed to 1. So there were definitely politics in how things were produced. The ID team created these things called the election judge station trays, where they could be preloaded for the poll workers in the warehouse before the election, and set up in seconds. It takes 45 minutes to do a polling place setup, and this part of the polling place took 27 seconds to set up when we demonstrated this system back to the Cook County Clerk's Office. We created sign systems, dealing with multiple languages. The red is instruction, the blue is information, and everything had meaning here. When we started implementing things like this, students would come back with pictures like this. They were very excited that their work was being produced, but we need adhesives, and we need to tell people to put the entry sign on doors so you can enter. I learned to be happy with the word significant improvement in this work, because every step forward was like another, 3 steps back, but we could still make improvement. I also spent a lot of time teaching election officials about design, which is an interesting challenge. And they like to follow rules, is what I quickly discovered. They're in the world of lawyers, and so they want to follow rules. And if you give them rules, they'll follow them. Not like design students. So you tell them lowercase letters are more legible and explain why, and they'll use them. So this is why lowercase letters are more legible. They form shapes that can be identified. Storytelling helps. I live in Evanston. I drive out of my driveway. I see this lake. It could be water, a calm body of water anywhere on the planet. I drive down Lakeshore Drive, and as I approach Chicago, the buildings can only be the city of Chicago. So that's the ascenders and descenders of letters are very much like a skyline and give you clues to where you're at. No center type anywhere in elections. And usually when I say this, everybody's flipping pages on their desk over, because center type is everywhere. And this is why, because center type is really a decorative form of typography where you have to begin each line at a separate point, and we read left to right, and you don't come back to the same point. So this just demonstrates how that improvement can make things clearer. These are where I tell them center type is allowed. Little bottles of wine and normal tushes. Nowhere else. Okay, so then this is the harder part. You can get people to use lowercase letters if you prove to them that they are more legible. You can get people to stop centering type. But how to get them to understand they have to make decisions about what is and is not important in a ballot. Because we have to minimize the font size, weight, and width variations. And all architects should do this too. Don't use so many sizes and weights of type. Actually, it's industrial designers that are the biggest offenders of this. So There were 6 different styles of type in the original ballot. We were able to do it with 2 sizes, 2 weights. It never needed more than 2 sizes, 2 weights. Black type on white is the most legible, it's the most contrasty, so you can see it more clearly, and you can use contrast to help things come forward. So this is just that ballot that I showed earlier, redesigned with all these principles, and then applied to now the technologies that are now being used, because punch card ballots have been eliminated. We have optical scan. The different manufacturers of optical scan make the decision about whether it's an arrow or an oval or ellipse or whatever the marking thing is, but the typography can be organized according to the new system. And of course, touchscreen. This is where we're having more trouble making inroads because of the touchscreen technology vendors. They don't want to talk to anybody else outside of their own world. So we have examples. We just don't have any takers. And word began to spread about what we were doing in these states. By 2004, these states that are made blue here had something to do with improving their election materials. And we were getting lots of attention in Europe because they didn't really love our president at the time. So we were in an exhibition at the Pompidou Center on Design for Everyday Life. We were in the Index competition in Copenhagen for Design to Improve Life, and we were featured in an exhibition in CERN focusing on the student work and the student processes at the sister school there. And, in 2002, the Help America Vote Act gave millions of dollars to states to improve their election process. And we then got the big commission, AIGA, when I say we, I mean AIGA got the big commission to then take this and make it into templates and tools that would be useful. And you can find this sort of on their website under Effective Polling Place Designs. Yeah, and you can find it much easier on the AIGA website. So there's tools here readily available to all election officials or any designer that wants to take them to an election official and say you should be doing this. And all of that was completed with also the book, which is an advocacy tool, was all completed in 2007 in time for the 2008 election. So that was a tremendous effort by many people, and it is the foundational work that Stephen and our students and I did here at UIC that is the basis of this now national, I should say federal, because it's really recommended for federal elections. And vote tomorrow. For your mayor. I don't think a vote in that election. Thank you.
Questions? What's the next project?
Yeah, I know. I'm afraid to get involved in anything again because the last one took 8 years. Yeah, I'm being cautious about what. And now I'm trying to encourage other faculty members to do these kinds of things. Yeah, I don't want. I mean, it's my own fault because Bob let me, talk about other things, and I still talk about this. So I got to move on. But for me, completing the book was the stuff that only I had. Now it's out in the world, so now I can get it out to other people. But I went to the U.S. Treasury this year for, I think I'm going to advise others to get involved, but I was invited to the U.S. Treasury to take a look at mortgage forms, because that's a big thing now. And Elizabeth Warren is leading the new Consumer Financial Protection Association, and she's really great, and so I think that's where you're going to see the next one of these big efforts that I'll go to meetings about, but I won't do.
You spoke to the whole issue of refinding the building, how problematic some is an idea about refinding. When you spoke at the administrators' conference on the work that you do and the relationships with architects, what was the kind of response that you received from that community? And I asked that for your increasing overlap when you see or envisioning what someone who is perceived as a graphic designer being involved in envisioning
Yeah.
of a school of the environment, for instance. What kind of responses do you receive from that audience?
Well, I think they were responsive but didn't quite know what to do with it. I mean, I think it's kind of a big problem because we have to change the way. Well, I actually think where it's changing is in the client side. The clients are saying, I want a wayfinding person on your project because I want to know someone's going to find a way to the 10th floor. So they're kind of driving it. But at the administrators conference, I have to say they showed the same two projects. They were more interested in how to get their students to use one typeface. Really, that's what they talked about. But I think there was interest. I just think we never got to the discussion about it.
No, I guess I guess the concern being that the conversation would be around graphic designer and wayfinding, whereas the work that you're doing, let's say, in envisioning exercise with what is a school of the environment, something that's very, very different.
Yes.
And the sorts of overlaps that we now see. So you look at IKEA, I think it's good for what they do is actually architecture. And what kind of response did you get from very specifically architectural educators when you were saying, oh, we were actually involved in understanding surrounding the creation of a school of the environment, whatever.
Yeah, College of the Environment. I did not. I mean, I think we should. I would have loved if that was the topic we discussed after the talk, but it wasn't. And it was. I think we can begin that kind of conversation here, right? This is where we have the opportunity with the change of structure in the college to find ways to have this discussion between graphics and graphic designers and architects. I mean, graphic designers need to have their eyes open as much as the world of architecture does to do this work properly. I mean, you can't. There's so much. I mean, we learned so much on that project about what can and can't be done, and how early you have to figure things out. And we're not good at imagining three-dimensional space, and how do you know it's actually, we were like actually shocked at work, you know, in the end as first, because we could make pictures of what these things look like. But we didn't, as graphic designers, we're not as able, I think, to imagine three-dimensional space. So I think where it could go in terms of architectural education, even though the conversation did not go there at that conference, is that we could talk about what kind of, courses can we develop that help open this area up. Because I think architects want to take the pictures of their buildings before the graphic designers get in there and put up those signs, right? And so how can we change that from happening? How can we have something that we all want, that we're all proud of showing? Is a good question. For us, it was about, I don't know, it was about being true to the identity of the organization, but being true to the architectural design. And I think those are topics that can be built into conversations and discussions. And the envisioning part of University of Washington.
You can see the reason why.
Yeah, well, and you're envisioning new places, and this was not yet a physical place, but would eventually be a physical place, and so we're imagining new types of organizations, you're imagining new types of organizations of space. I think these things are really relevant. And it takes projects like that for me to engage with the participatory design processes that are being touted by IT, for example. I've had a lot of bad experiences with people who think that you get a group of people together and get their ideas and that's design. And so we need more examples of what it really means, where the design expertise comes into play, and how we can engage with these processes. And I think Bruce is very involved in this. He like to call it the science divide, and how do you on one side we're using scientific techniques to validate design, and we're using people in audience to create design, and we need to be the masters of that. I mean, I think we're in your territory here, right? I mean, you've had to do this for a long time as architects. I'm sorry I'm not answering, but
when you're doing something like the election ballots and communicating content discriminate success or failure? When you're doing like the how do you figure out, like, what are the rules for proportions and determining where confusion isn't necessarily like that? Maybe you're trying to express a certain feeling or kind of emotion, because it's much more iconographic image. But like there are all those drawings of different lines. How do you discriminate differently?
Oh, you mean back in when we're doing the logo? Well, that is the graphic design part. I mean, that's the skill and years of learning part to create the emotional impact you have with those skills. The information design, how to design a better ballot, is what you can actually teach others in a way because it's very straightforward. So I don't know how to say it. I mean, you look for certain emotional qualities. You look for, yeah. I mean, I think we're all about trying to connect people with information or people with ideas. And so in identity work, the creating of a symbol that represents voting is more the emotional side of that. But I don't know how to tell you how to do it unless you come and take a class with us. Yeah.
I just want to follow up on that. If part of the work is clarity, and another part of it for a moment is to cause a moment of pause, for example, shimmer and this person. So if you accept those as two different avenues, fork in the road, when does that fork become apparent to you? Which task you're up to, early or late?
Well, when you see that bad ballot, it's clear early on what to do. And when you have the question, here are the two questions answered by graphic design. It's this one, right? Right. So that one we know where we're at in the spectrum, and it's this one. How do you bring those things together? And to me, a place of Jewish cultural studies and a building that's going to be an aberration on Michigan Avenue has that emotional context right away. And a ballot is about how do you get someone to see what they need to do in a few seconds. So I don't think, as graphic designers, I don't think we talk about that much, but I think we, you know where you're at, you know what the goal is.
Are they divorced approaches then?
No, they're not. In fact, if we would have told Spurtis we're going to create, some poetry for your building and people are going to find a way, they would have thrown us right out. I mean, not preconception, but Spurtis Institute. We're like, we're going to help you find that 10th floor, 9th floor. And so you don't know what the solution is in the process. And of course, people still have to find a way. Yeah. Bad ballot. But I guess what all this is as a graphic designer, you really do work in the spectrum.
I mean, this was obviously not undesigned, right? So how did it end up this way? Like it's clear that there's something wrong. It's probably not really thoughtful.
Right. Well, I know those.
So, like,
yeah.
How do you?
Election officials don't know there is something called a graphic designer. That's how it happens. They use print. At this time these were being printed by printers, and so they send their information to a printer and they get something back. And they had no idea that we existed as a profession. That's why for us it was such an advocacy opportunity for AIGA, for the profession, because we said we see stuff like this all the time, right? Like, and you just need to say, wait, I'm here, I do this, we can make it better, and that's what that was all about. That's why I'm involved in it, because the design challenge is not so huge, right? The way Spurtis to me was a really interesting design challenge.
What if the holes were a lot bigger?
That would be a different punch card. Yeah. So that was a
Each ballot had half the amount of voting on it, with twice as big a hole. Does that make it bigger?
Well, maybe, but that was a limitation of the technology, because the technology of the punch card had 250 some holes on it.
Can I ask my question first? Go ahead. It's a follow-up to the last two, really, which is how, as a graphic designer, do you establish signature? Which is to say, not the column that's given, but the stuff that you do that if you were just talking to graphic design friends, you'd say, that thing's really amazing. you know, like not what the talk of the client is or really even what it does, but there's something that you do that carries through all the projects regardless of pro bono, profit, you know, like what's your way of working, or what would be the studio lab sort of signature or the thing that you would say we're about, right? Separate from doing a good job, which of course.
Yeah. It's like, who are you, right? No, it's true. I mean, I think one of the problems I have as an owner of a design practice is that I don't want to commit to anything like that. And so I really see it as an extension of being an educator. It's a place where I can experiment with this area of design that used to be called graphic design, and we're still called graphic design, but that is now engaged in questions of envisioning new colleges and things like that. It's just how can you bring the skills that a designer has to bear on larger questions. But knowing that if you can't do this and do it well and put it in front of people, you can't get there. So I guess we're about, I mean, it depends on who we're talking to. We change, we're like, who we're dating, we're like, you know, when we're talking at University of Washington, we said we help organizations imagine and realize new futures. I mean, new possible futures. So we're at that scale. When I'm going in to talk to David Orr, I'm like, I can help you get reelected because I can make this better and people will notice. So it's really, I think we're about advocacy in the end, or that's what I'm about, and therefore that's what Studio Lab becomes about. And I think we're always questioning what do you call this thing that we do, and so I don't have any. I don't know how to explain Studio Lab, except we're a bunch
But your
of
own
people.
training in kind of say Swiss model and the typography, like in other words, the way you approach a problem would be different than the way another graphic designer would,
Because we're masters of typography, for one thing. Yeah, we can say that. We can say we're interested in forwarding organizations, and we're interested in the details of typography. And we can definitely say those things.
First of all, I mean, a lot of the graphics had that kind of thing. I mean, at least the Spiritus, you know, the two fonts separated and offset. There's a lot of that sort of layer. I mean, maybe the minimum use of fonts, but the maximum effect. A lot of scaling, like even the both things, got a kind of scale of the elements as well as things. So I'm just trying to figure out. It just goes back to when you were when Michael Rock lectured. You were also, and I don't remember if it was the title that I was about content, but something along the lines. There seemed to me to be a call for graphic designers also to have kind of thing separate from the meat message that they were conveying. Like, you know, so you said, here's all my flower projects, or whatever. I mean, it's specious and kind of naive, but there was a desire to say, I don't really care what the project is. I'm going to do this thing on it as my experiment, regardless of what comes over the trends.
So then I would have to say it is advocacy for the profession, to move the profession forward, to move the practice of design, graphic design forward in these ways. Every project we do at Studio Lab is in some way doing that, either within an organization or within industry. Right now we're doing a lot of work in the medical industry. My God, they're in the dark ages, and so we are, trying to change the industry in that way.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, I'm just struck having seen a number of architectural talks, a number of architectural designers, and knowing your work and having spent time in both schools. I mean, yeah, on the one hand, I'm impressed by the way you come back to this kind of, methodology that is about sort of solving problems. But I'm also stunned that I think that, I'll pleasure again, is the way that you don't discuss a kind of methodology of responding to formal questions of generating form, which is often, at least in my experience, what architectural talks are about. And your presentation, you do very little of saying, well, I did this, and then we came up with this, whereas that would often be what an architect would spend a lot of time talking about. Not that I have, the question, but it is striking to me how different it is, and I've been, the time I spent in the design school, how insistent you guys as a discipline are on that, even though it is obvious that there is a signature, right? There is an aesthetic that's consistent throughout all of these works, and I'm wondering how you would characterize that. I mean, if you had to characterize it just in aesthetic terms, without recourse to, without
that how you would say that. Because even this rhetoric of trying to advance the discipline, you know, in architecture would normally be not about responding to the program given by a client, right? It would be about using that program to do something purely disciplinary. So
we're doing the same. I mean, there's nothing in any of our work that is a direct response to the client directive. I mean, it is, and it certainly does solve problems, but they're always reframed problems, and they're never the problem that's brought to bear, right? So I don't know. I truly don't know how to characterize it formally. Isn't that weird? I mean, I know it's clear. I know it's. I mean, I really don't. And I think part of the reason I present the way I do is because I'm in this stage of leading two organizations, right? And not of, I could show you thousands of slides of how we finally got that Flickr type to work. But once we had the idea conceptually, we wanted to make it work formally, and we were going to keep at it until we did. So there's plenty of that in discussion of like, which typefaces is it, and how do they fit together, and when do you get it just right, and what's the darkness and lightness of it. And we had to make it a little darker than we wanted in the final result because the client wasn't confident it was going to read otherwise. I mean, there's all of that stuff is there, but I think of it more as this example of which I think there are very few of, in terms of human connection to a building that architects don't hate. And I'm proud of that, and that's what I come away with because the work was done by others in the firm. I mean, I'm leading that now, so it might be also just where I'm at that I talk about it this way.
With your design, the palette becomes more clear and more communicable, but with another good designer's work, the designer could have intentionally tricked the audience to vote for Bush, let's say.
Yeah.
So this is not only a matter, this is definitely a matter of good design, but it's not only that, it's also a matter of decent politics. So I wonder how much do you think needs, I mean, in this case, the answers are obvious, but not the political questions or the ethical questions are not as black and white in every situation. So I wonder how much do you think the sophistication of political issues or ethical issues should be part of the disciplinary question, or should be part of the education of the designer?
Well, I think ethical issues are definitely part of an education of a designer, but I can say that I was very surprised actually how ethical election officials are. And you have to be very clever, a very clever designer to get people to vote in a way that you want them to vote. I mean, that's like, they're not that clever because they're not designing. I mean, election officials design ballots. I mean, there are no designers there. But I think ethics, I mean, we face ethical issues when we're promoting organizations we don't believe in, right? I mean, that happens all the time to young designers who get into jobs, that they're doing that. You can be told, I've been told in annual reports to, make a chart look like the results are better. And you just have to, you have to figure out how to deal with it. Sometimes you're not in a position, it depends on where you are, to change that. But I think education, professional ethics is very important. Yeah. There's also sort of some bad business practices that I think are going away now, of people making money on marking up, printing and stuff like that, that I think are finally, part of the past, or for the most part. But we face plenty of ethical issues. And I think getting involved in projects like this are the ways we can show our ethical response to design, as designers, to other things. Yeah. Bruce?
The before and after for your for the ballot is really striking. It's like the Biggest Loser finale, right? Between the 300-pound person. And you talk about the rationality that went into it, and I guess I'm wondering about the limits of rationality. In design process, you're juggling, competing interests, and I was wondering if there's anything on the ballot that you think is not fully rational, or may not be driven by this is the absolute best way to read this. or if, I mean, that was just like one. I mean, it's obviously the primary driver of this. I guess I'm worried. I'm interested in cases in which, you know, it's sort of like the earlier questions, where you kind of balance the artistry and the kind of the hipness of something and the main driver there. So, is there anything on here that is not perfectly rational?
Not perfectly rational. Well, it's not rational to have this many names on a page with that many bunches of holes, but that's
given
not
those
something I can
constraints.
control. Yeah.
Like, how do you decide the corners?
To do the round thing.
Yeah,
It's demonstrative. Yes, because you still want everything to be cool at the end.
Right. Yeah. That's
There you go, now you're
Yeah.
talking. That's all I need.
Okay, good. No, I mean, it would have looked, you know, really like deadly. I mean, you want it to be a friendly process voting. You want, you know, so that. No, for sure. And then there were people working on this problem. I wasn't the only one working on it. They were doing sort of great big arrows to point to the holes because they thought that was the thing. But that you do that, and then suddenly arrows more important than. So I think sort of in terms of the hierarchy, everything is. Yeah, no, the curves and sort of the shading too, the gray background, which ultimately couldn't be done because we didn't ask for it and when we changed the law. It was also a law about it to be on white. But no, you know, I mean, we are trying to do everything with an aesthetic sense that I don't know how to describe, but yes, cool.
What about the shading on the no as the...
Just need to distinguish no from yes and have to choose which one it goes on.
And
You know?
the relationship to the background doesn't suggest anything to me.
Meaning that no is bad.
No, meaning no to legitimize the background. No is the context.
Oh, I see. I heard it the other
It's
way.
got a big fat line.
Like yes is on white, it's bright. There we go.
It's got a big fat line in there. So it's also a way of connecting the color onto the ballot, onto the background. Yeah, I mean, that's about it. I mean, yes, no. And here, you know, it's judicial retention, so it's quite different. You're voting someone out. It's a little less.
We want to make it a little harder to say no.
Well, first of all, nobody knows who these people are. There was this public policy person at UIC doing his PhD in retention elections at the time that we did this, and contacted me and brought me this chart that shows that this improved ballot, and it wasn't even quite like this because it wasn't quite as cool as this, but it was this improved ballot increased participation in just getting through this section by 20%. It took me a while to understand what his chart meant. But people would begin at the beginning of this whole section of the ballot and vote, give up, turn the page, vote a little bit, turn the page, vote, and you can see it statistically. And people voted for women judges too. So you can see spikes in that.
There's also ethnicity too. A lot of Irish.
Yeah, and apparently there's an alphabetical pulling of letters out of the thing, and that's the order they go in. So my understanding is that's all actually not fixed.